Oxnard was considered an old west town. It was full of stevedores. It had docks. It had houses of prostitution galore, and it had a lot of saloons and gambling casinos. Well, when he was a young man practicing law in Oxnard, the local DA, he was going after the Chinese businessmen that were running a lottery and had illegal gambling, if you will. And the Chinese businessmen ended up playing cards or illegal gambling with undercover detectives at that time. Now, when they got arrested, Erle, he was, if anybody was willing to defend these guys, nobody would step up except Erle, because he was a real liberal when it came to different races at that time. He was real open, and he knew these guys were getting the shaft. There were 21 of these Chinese guys. So what he had them do is he had them switch businesses. So when the warrants were sworn out for their arrest, they ended up nabbing the wrong guys. Now there was this one Chinese character named Wang Duck, and he bet himself that when they were served the warrants, he knew that the servers, or rather I guess the sheriff is the one that serves. He knew that they wouldn't be able to tell them apart. So so this one guy, his name was Wang Duck, and when they nabbed him, he said he wasn't Wang. Well, the guy that they were looking for as the guy Wang Duck, it was another Chinese guy, and he swore it wasn't him. But the guy said, "Oh, you're just lying. Stop this, man. You're like, come on. Here's the warrant. You've been served." So when I went to court, all of those 21 defendants had been served with the wrong warrant. So the judge, the humiliated judge, and the sheriff, they ended up having to throw it out of court because it was just from the get-go, it was like totally screwed up, illegal. So anyway, he ended up getting them all off. So the next day, and if you know anything about headlines back in those days, what they called yellow journalism, yellow sensational journalism, the headline was, "Wang Duck is wrong duck, says deputy sheriff." So that's the kind of ingenious legal maneuverings Erle Stanley Gardner, and he was a young man. He was born in 1889, so he would have been 23, 24 when he figured out that idea. And then if you ever read his books, you'll find out all these shenanigans that he did. They were legal, illegal, just like the way Perry Mason in the book, when he would try to bust into a place or whatever, and then Paul Drake would go, "You know what, Perry, you're just this side of illegal. I'm going to go down to the car and I'm going to pretend I didn't see you doing that." Okay, let me give you another example of what he did. His razzle-dazzle genius. He had another client who was Chinese, and he got arrested for illegal gambling. So what Erle did, he got him off on a technicality because he said that gambling was illegal gambling was constitutional, and the ordinance in Oxnard was illegal, it was unconstitutional. So then he said he knew that the DA, when he found out about it, he would still get him on the state charge, illegal gambling. So what he did was he snuck his client here to Ventura, and he swore out a complaint against his own client. And then he told the judge that he felt bad for getting his client off on a technicality, and he had his Chinese client plead guilty. So the judge, he understood, and he said, "Well, that's great that you feel bad about it, so I'm going to fine him $10." So when the next day, when the DA arrested his client in Oxnard and they went to court, he says, "You can't try my my client. Why? Because that's double jeopardy. So he got him off because the DA wanted to put this poor bastard in jail for 6 months. So he ended up getting him off with a $10 fine by a little trickaroo, a legal maneuver that he was a genius at. And so let me say one more thing. I know a lot of you fans say I'm like into this hocus pocus stuff, but he was a Cancer, but he had Pisces rising, Virgo rising, and Virgos, when any sign has that rising sign, they tend to notice subtleties and details that nobody else does. So by having that rising sign in his chart, that was why he was so perfect in detail. And if you're gonna ever read one book of Erle Stanley Gardner, Perry Mason, try to read The Case of the Shoplifter's Shoe. That's the most ingenious and extraordinary somersaults of logic that I've ever come across. So if you ever read one book of the great Erle Stanley Gardner, of his fantastic character Perry Mason, read that one book and it'll make up for all the other books. It's just the most extraordinary logic that he uses to prove ballistics, and just totally amazing. Okay, so let's go back and this place, I could just imagine him walking in that alley right there. This must have been, I don't think it would have been a parking lot. It would have been an alley, and then maybe an alley this way, and then this probably would have been all shops. But he left here in 1937, but then it said over there, down over there, that he left in 1935. But everything I read, he got so wealthy from his Perry Mason books that he finally moved. And he was a famous sportsman. He was always hunting. He loved Baja California. He was always traveling there in a caravan and parking in the middle of nowhere with his 3 secretaries and his driver, and I think he had like a cook. And wherever he went, those 3 women, until 1970, whatever he said, they'd write it down and they type it up. I guess they had like a daisy chain. One would take dictation, the other one would write it up, edit it, and then the other one would type it up. And then he'd submit the stories through mail to William Morrow Publishing Company. And for years he'd carry on correspondence with the editors. And then they tell him, you know what, Earl, you're kind of nebulous here. You can't, the way we're collating it, you missed out on something right here. Can you rewrite it and fill it in and make it less nebulous? Okay, well, here you go. And at least that sign is original right there. I can't read it right here. Lindsay. Okay, well, here you go, you fans all over the world. And let's go around here. I'm thinking about going to his house where he lived, where he would also dictate into a dictaphone over. He lived on Foster Avenue, and in his house over the garage he had an office, and I'm thinking about going over there, but they did retrofit it and it doesn't quite look the same. But here you go, you fans all over the world. The most famous writer, the most prolific writer of the 20th century, where he invented Perry Mason, Della Street, Paul Drake, Gertie, Lieutenant Arthur Tragg, and D.A. Hamilton Berger, and his junior lawyer Frank Everly. The Erle Stanley Gardner building, at least it signifies that. That's the only proof that he ever lived, and he changed the 20th century in detective fiction. Okay, Earl, thank you for those fantastic, intricate, extraordinary books that you wrote for the world, to take us out of our troubles and our bored pastimes, and made them somewhat livable with those fantastic books. And you fans of my channel, please subscribe. And Earl, wherever you're at, good night, sweet prince. Okay, thank you very much.